Lehman's use of an accounting device known as Repo 105 to manage its balance sheet in the months leading up to the firm's collapse has raised all kinds of legal questions for the firm's auditors, its legal counsel, and even its top executives. Here to discuss the topic is the editor-in-chief of the Westlaw Business Currents, a division of Thomson Reuters, Ellie Rasin. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Does it look like Lehman crossed some sort of line here in the use of this Repo 105?
So our analysts at Westlaw Business have been looking at this and reading through the examiner's report, and certainly at first blush, it sure looks that way. What they seem to have done with this is settled on Repo 105 as almost a bridging strategy to get them through the tough period at the end of 07, early 08 in particular, to what they hoped would be a better, rosier future. And in the meantime, they settled on some strategies that were basically active balance sheet management, essentially what you could consider hiding assets, or very closely actually managing their leverage ratio and hiding that in essence, or hiding a portion of it. And when you look at the actual transactions that they undertook, what they did was what all too often is phrased as an off-balance sheet transaction, which usually have two purposes. One is to come up with some sort of financing, some way of funding yourself through a difficult period. But the other, the one that people often don't pay as much attention to, is that by moving things off their balance sheet, they're moving out of the gaze of regulators, which is often the case, and in this case, not only regulators, but rating agencies and the investing public at large.
How about the role of the chief financial officers? Did they breach their fiduciary responsibility to shareholders?
So as officers of the company, they absolutely have responsibilities to the broader executive and the shareholders, more importantly, and of course the board. In this case, I don't think we can settle on just the CFOs. It seems to have been a company-wide discussion and understanding that the CFOs and other officers of the companies were wide aware of, where these active balance sheet management strategies were used in order to present a rosier picture of the company at those precise moments, end of quarter disclosures basically, where they needed to present that rosier picture.
Do we have any idea if Lehman's counterparties would have been aware of what was going on?
So we don't know that yet, but that's one of the questions that we're wondering. If you actually look at the list of counterparties, they're extremely reputable banks, and they're extremely sophisticated organizations. And they should have known that if they were getting higher returns on these sorts of transactions, that wasn't out of the goodness of Lehman's heart. And they also had to know that the industry standard was not these Repo 105 transactions. As best as we can detect right now, Lehman was somewhat unique among the major banks at using this. So if you were a counterparty, you had to have known that there was something special going on here, and you had to have wondered why that was.
All right, we had people signing off on Lehman's numbers. We have Ernst & Young and the auditor, and we also have Linklater, which was the law firm. So the question there is, what legal implications possibly are there for those two firms?
By Linklater signing this document called its opinion and stating, in our opinion, this is a true sale, this is something we think meets certain accounting treatment, they weren't just saying, hey, this is something you might be interested in hearing. They were saying something this is we believe in, and perhaps this is something that we may be ultimately liable for. Not criminally liable, but civilly. That remains to be determined, and there's a lot of thresholds one has to get through to make any kind of broad claim like that. But that's certainly the buzz that you hear right now on the street. Ernst & Young in this case did two things differently than Linklater's. One is it regularly reviewed quarterly and annual statements and said they passed muster, and two is it basically ignored the legal requirement that Sarbanes-Oxley, among others, had imposed on it.
You know, you mentioned off-balance sheet transactions early on in this conversation. It's been more than 8 years since Enron collapsed. Here we are having a conversation about balance sheet concerns. Are American accounting standards still not where they should be?
So it's a great question, and speaking personally for a moment, I don't know that the issue here is accounting standards per se. The accounting standards are somewhat dry documents that tell you how to handle a certain type of transaction. The thing that's missing to my eye here is disclosure standards, and essentially you can treat this however you'd like to. You can claim it's a true sale, but if you believe that, say it. Don't hide it. Don't claim that this situation is much rosier than it actually is on your quarterly earnings calls, as Lehman did. But rather come right forth and state it. And there are sections of your disclosure documents that are designed to allow you to come right out and say, here's what my liquidity looks like, here's what my capital resources look like, here's what my collateralized obligations look like. And in Lehman's case, what they didn't do was each of those things. Instead, what they said is everything is great, look at how far down our net leverage has come. That's a good sign. And in fact, behind the scenes, as we all now know, that was simply not the case.
Ellie, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We want to thank Ellie Rasin, who's editor-in-chief of Westlaw Business Currents. This is Reuters.